Good morning, my name is Igor Vitale and I give you my welcome to the lesson The Culture of Haute Cuisine. This lesson is inspired by the course we held in Samoa on the 7th October 2025 for the Erasmus project Agriculture Tourism Alliance from Farm to Fork Strategy in the Pacific Island countries. I'm Igor Vitale, I am a work and organizational psychologist and I represent in this project the Igor Vitale International. First of all, I would like to thank the hosts from Samoa, the National University of Samoa and the University of the South Pacific for hosting us at a conference in Samoa. This is our project. It's a project approved under the Capacity Building in Higher Education, Pacific Ocean, and involves organizations and universities from Slovakia, Italy, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Samoa. We already held an action in Fiji, hosted by the Fiji National University and the University of South Pacific from Fiji. As anticipated, I'm Igor Vitale, I'm a work and organizational psychologist and international trainer. I started my career as a psychologist in 2013, and then after years I started to develop skills to apply work and organizational psychology in different fields of intervention from 2018 in the field of tourism by leading trainings across different types of accommodation sites, hotels from 3, 4, 5 stars, 5 stars luxury, resorts, but also rural communities and agritourisms. My organization is from the southern Italy, specifically from the city of Foggia in the Puglia region, a region strongly based on agriculture, but recently from the 2010 also in the field of tourism. Puglia started to become recognized internationally and one of the main destinations in Italy. Of course, to held this training in Samoa, we did a very long road. We did Foggia, Fiji, passing through Los Angeles, and then Fiji to Samoa. Igor Vitale International is a company located in Foggia, a territory based on a great biodiversity, so based on islands, coastal areas, lakes, mountains, lowlands, and with an important predominance of agriculture. Is ranked 99 across 107 Italian provinces in quality of life, but ranked first in happiness across the Italian provinces, having the lowest consumption of antidepressants. Foggia is a territory, as you can see from this landscape, strongly based on agriculture. Our products are around cereals, olives, tomatoes, and so on. We have different types of local varieties and also a strong biodiversity. Differently from the national average, the 37.41% of companies from Foggia are in agriculture, and this build a good structure for the framework of agritourism. I will talk you about this today, as agritourism structures and companies in Italy are farming companies also hosting accommodation activities. The overall Italian data on the number of companies within agriculture is the 13.3%, so Foggia is approximately 3 times that number. Let's see here the culture of haute cuisine. Of course, I will not talk about haute cuisine targeting rare and imported ingredients. I will talk about the haute cuisine using only local ingredients, which sometimes is perceived by the sector as a kind of contradiction. In reality, we should move the attention of, let's say, the perception of high quality and luxury, basing our experience on sustainability and local territory. So sometimes those providing haute cuisine would like to show very researched and rare ingredients, and of course a remotely imported ingredients may be very rare in a specific territory, so what's exotic in one territory is local in another, but we have to move consumers by showing not this kind of luxury, but a luxury based on sustainability, on the valorization of the local ingredients. Ingredients that are maybe potentially accessible but rarely used or rarely processed in a way that is truly palatable, and talking about the territory. This is the very important element to be considered. If we don't pass through this, of course, we have a problem. First of all, let's see in our lesson here what is an agritourism, because of course in Italy there is a law defining what's inside the agritourism or what's outside. If you have a law, you can regulate truly. In other countries, we are in more generic framework, sometimes less documented and regulated frameworks, talking about rural tourism. Definitions of agritourism are many. Of course, it's not a new concept in general, but the regulations are kind of recent because, of course, the regulations about food and tourism are evolving. First, of course, this is not the only way to see the phenomenon, but it's a way to see the phenomenon of agritourism. In Italy, agritourism companies are farms, and this distinction is not random and is also very important. So they are not hotels also having a garden or a production, but are farms also having accommodation, which is completely different in terms of enterprises. So if you want to open agritourism in Italy, you should be a producer. If you're not a producer, the category is different, and also, let's say, the legislation is different. Essentially, all rotates around the concept of multifunctional farming. Multifunctional farming, if you see the term, shows that it's not only farming for their main goal. The goal of farming is production first. Then, of course, can be more or less sustainable, more or less healthy, and so on. But farming. Multifunctional means that within this framework, farms are not only producers, but also may do other actions. There can be accommodation, green stays, or can be recreational activities, can be educational activities, and so on. So, multifunctional farming means farms offering services different from offering only the production, different from the production. So agriculture in Italy is not only producing food, but an agritourism can add other functionalities. These functionalities support the farm in producing prosperity, because of course there is an added value in all these activities. These activities should be helpful but also sustainable on the economic point of view. First, and very common, agritourism can maybe not only producer but also restaurants, so offering lunch and dinner or other types of food services. Agritourism, of course, if you want to, of course, let's say underline the tourism side, are also accommodation. So you may stay in the farm, and of course the regulation tells you what exactly you can do, and offering to tourists a truly immersive experience in a natural setting, because of course if you stay in a farm, if you stay in a producer site, you will be at contact with the nature and you will be in a very, very nice external context. Agritourism also recently regulated educational farming. Educational farming means that you use farms in order to provide education to specific targets. These specific targets are not only educated per se, but also can increase their skills in the knowledge of sustainable food. Which means that, of course, through the educational farming, you don't provide only education, but also you teach consumers the value of your offer. For example, if you do a tour about tomato production, in the meantime, of course, you can provide information about the healthiness of tomatoes. And by providing information about healthiness of tomatoes, you can, of course, encourage consumers in his interest to eat and to embed in their diet vegetable-based foods. Educational farming is quite regulated in Italy, so it's not only meaning actions related to transfer the education, but you can apply, for example, the process in schools. We have the model of fattorie didattiche, which is educational farms, which are used also to transfer information about food in the students. This intersects with many other actions. There are actions in Europe, for example, for promoting fruit, vegetable, and milk across school students, the EU Milk Scheme, for example. Then we have the social agriculture, which is also a very interesting framework because the social agriculture aims to empower especially people with fewer opportunities, maybe people with disability or people with a disadvantaged background, are brought again in agriculture, and of course those complying with the requirements of social agriculture have some incentives. So this is particularly helpful if you want to provide inclusive education, inclusive employment, participation of people with disability in the mission of agriculture. So as you can see, within the multifunctional farming, you have truly a diverse range of possible activities that also implies different skills that agritourism workers should have. Because of course, one thing is producing, and this is already highly technical. One other thing is to produce but bring this production to the table and make a restaurant. Another thing is to embed these kind of principles into accommodation and so on. And also if you think agritourism, when offering accommodation, should be not only a producer with some rooms. You can combine these elements. So of course breakfast will be a breakfast based on the products. Of course you can personalize the stay of the travelers within a concept of agritourism. It should be not only a farm with some rooms, but you should combine the agritourism framework and tailor the strategy for the accommodation. Again, agritourism in Italy include also heritage, for example, production and the valorization of cultural activities, for example, or also recreational and sports activities. Again, here, is another type of know-how that the agritourism worker should have. For example, of course, for the cultural activities, you may have need of, let's say, an anthropological knowledge and historical knowledge by showing the true culture behind some food production or some agricultural practices. For the recreational and sports, of course, you may need a know-how more related with the sports activities or even with the physical education, or again with the design, let's say, of more educational or entertaining activities. Again, here the agritourism, of course, is a truly targeting a big variety of competencies that may lead an agritourism to truly use the secondary activities to generate income, but also to offer a variety of options to our travelers. But especially is not only the point of variety, is the point of uniqueness of the services connected to agritourism. Agritourism are located in a specific context, are located in a geographical context, so of course may have the weakness, the obstacle of being remote because you have to reach these places, but the strong advantage to be situated in a specific context. That is unique and that may counterbalance, let's say, the obstacles of remoteness with a strong uniqueness, because you cannot replicate the agritourism, I don't know, in a urban territory or peri-urban territory. So agritourism, the idea behind the agritourism is also market diversification. The producer, producing tomato, cereals, olive oil or whatever, become also somebody who offers education around the product, incredible stays, restaurants valorizing their product, educational farming, eventually inclusion, and so on. So the agritourism becomes something truly multidimensional. Now, we are here in the Samoan territory, and I want to show you what we did in Italy and what potentially could be replicated in the Samoan territory by learning something about what we discovered after around 20 years of application of the law. So, first of all, when we talk about agritourisms, We are talking about something regulated in Italy from 2006, which means that not only there is a law, but also we applied this law for around 20 years and we discovered what's working less. What's telling the law in terms of mission of the agritourism? The agritourism should protect the specific resources of each territory. It should preserve human activities in the rural areas. It should promote multifunctionality in agriculture and the diversification of agricultural incomes. So you see here the dimension of incomes is there, the multifunctional dimension is there. Protect the soil, territory, environment, restore eventually rural buildings and protecting landscapes features. We have very interesting case studies in Italy in preserving this, in preserving entire territories. Then again, the missions of the agritourism are supporting and encouraging typical products, quality products, food and wine traditions. Of course, this intersects with the European laws about the geographical indication. These laws preserve the features of specific preparation of food, but also wine and spirits. So of course wine and spirits are not across the healthy options, but this refers to all types of labels that especially preserve the geographies. Then we have the promote rural culture and food education. Again, here you can measure the education applied, for example, when hosting students from schools, and promote agriculture and forestry development. So again, here you can see the broadness, at least in terms of missions of the agritourisms. And this was the start, and it was 2006, so it was a completely different scenario in terms of tourism activities. Now, after 20 years, we can say, because there is a very important report which is Agriculture and Multifunctionality by ISMEA, which is an Italian institute, gathering data on many elements of the agricultural economies in Italy. But this this ISMEA report from the 2024 shown that agritourism is, and in general secondary activities of farming are truly giving value to agriculture. So without the secondary activities, we would have farms with a lower income, essentially. The estimates by the SMEA report 2024 is that the 19.6% of the value in agriculture is determined by something that is not production, is determined by secondary activities. So non-production activities, including restaurants, including accommodation, so farm stays, education of farming, and so on. So the Italian production of agriculture, secondary activities, is 6.2 billion euros. So it's something. And we have to say 30% of the total value of secondary activities in the EU is generated in Italy. Italy has a strong advantage, which is something that goes beyond the regulation, that is the strong biodiversity. So truly Italy can take advantage from its biodiversity to valorize all these kind of geographical indications and of course varieties of ingredients. The same broadness cannot be replicated anywhere, but of course all territories, also the most remote ones, also those not having truly a very extensive biodiversity, can take advantage from the same strategies. Maybe making more an action of effectiveness or rationalization of efforts, because of course if you don't have a big variety of products it's more difficult, but still you can do lots of things. And now there is a question, and we can tell it, I think, after the 20 years of application of agritourism in Italy. Why it works? We can tell many things, but the Italian state recognized the social value of agritourism. How? It makes it in a very concrete way, and the concrete way is fiscal advantage. At least one of these concrete ways is the fiscal advantage. those applying multifunctionality of farming, agritourism, secondary activities of farming, and so on as a fiscal advantage, which is something in Italy. The fiscal advantage, so the fact that if you open an agritourism or if you offer social agriculture activities, of course you have a fiscal advantage. So essentially you pay less taxes if you comply with the framework, goes together with specific regulations. So in order to be an agritourism, you have to follow some specific regulations. If you don't follow, you are not in the framework of agritourism. So, what are these fiscal advantages? First, and this is applicable in Italy and applied in many sectors, in Italy we have regional regulations, and this is true also for the agritourism. Every region have, let's say, maybe not a completely different law, even if of course these are regional laws technically. We don't have to think that in Italy we have 20 different laws of agriculture, but let's say these are more different variation on the theme. So first of all, do you know how many laws regulates multifunctionalities of farming in Italy? The overall amount of regulations is 116. So there are lots of regulation about agritourism, and these are distributed across the Italian regions. This is related to the fact that regions in Italy are different even economically and also in terms of main products. For example, there are vertical regulation about implementing actions on a specific niche of agritourism. Let's think to the oleotourism, so the tourism of olive oil, or the wine tourism. All these things are regulated in Italy and are sometimes regulated regionally, so every region have to focus on the regulation at the regional level. So virtually opening an agritourism in Puglia region may be different from the Veneto region. And of course the compliance is strict. You cannot improvise in this sense. In terms of regulation for the use of sustainable food, in terms of regulation for the use of local food, and so on. And the non-compliance implies big fines. So, for example, if you are located in the Marche region and instead of using the local products you import beer from Germany, you are not compliant with the regulation, and there is a history of big fines, big penalties for not complying with these rules. And this has a technical reason, of course. If the law gives an advantage by complying with some actions that have a social value, for example, preserving the territory, or for example, ensuring the inclusion of people with disability within the workplace, of course, this should be regulated, encouraged in general way, but of course, if somebody try to take advantage by this but not truly complying, it's normal that there is a economic penalty in this sense. Now, this kind of activities have demonstrated a good action, a good effect. Of course, from 2010 we have also regulation about social agriculture and multifunctionality of farming. In this graph taken by the ISMEA report, but based on the Italian Institute of Statistics data, the ISTAT, you can see that the agricultural production of services based on secondary activities, starting from its basis, you can see the red line going up after the regulation from 2010. This is very interesting, showing that the secondary activities in farming truly give an added monetary value. You see on the 2020 that there has been a decreased level of these generated incomes, but of course it was the years of the COVID crisis with regulation making impossible some forms of tourism. That anyhow tells us something about the role of tourism in this sense. Now there is a big question. As I show you, an agritourism framework implies different services: restaurant, accommodation, recreational activities, and so on. The recent ISMEA report showed also what are these additional services that are truly producing true income in Italy. So there is a basic, let's imagine, basic value from the 2010 is 100. The added value of recreational sports and cultural activities is a plus 12%. Accommodation is quite kind of predominant, also because, of course, tendentially accommodation rates are higher than the participation to recreational sports activities. Restaurants is tendentially the one of the most selected extra services, of course, also because the restaurant located in agritourism is strictly related with the production of that agritourism, even if, of course, agritourism can use other local ingredients, not only their productions. But you can see that one of the most successful activities within agritourism is not the structured format of the lunch or the dinner as a restaurant settings, but food tasting has a very, very high value. Maybe because after the coronavirus crisis, we learned to rely on more flexible forms of tourism, not a structured form with many days or with structural activities related to restaurant, also more flexible and more, let's say, moderated action like the food tasting. Agritourism recovered from the COVID period. As you can see, we anyhow increased the number of visitors in agritourism after the COVID crisis. At least this is the data from the 2022. You can see that the number of visitors is higher than before, is higher than before the crisis. It's not true for all types of tourism in Europe. Okay, some of them didn't truly recover from the COVID crisis and didn't improve their conditions and their presence after the COVID crisis. Of course, this set of strategy and framework can be used and reinforced not only through the regulations, but also through capacities. As I shown you, the secondary activities of farming are very different. So you may have, I don't know, an excellent product, an excellent cheese, a good wine, or you can be a good fruit and vegetable producer. Amazing. And this is your competence of producing products. Then there is a second capacity, the capacity to valorize that products. And this you can do it in the agritourism through capacities of educational marketing. In the next lesson, I will show you how to apply a model of educational marketing within the agritourism by showing that production is one competence, but you have then the competence of marketing your products, of doing educational marketing or educational farming or doing any other part of the agritourism framework. I will show you then the basic capacities for stimulating agritourism success, but also sectoral capacities within all of the frameworks. Thank you.